Hello everyone. Welcome to my talk, AI for the Better. And if I say AI for the Better, I mean the better life of people with disabilities. PWD is the abbreviation of people with disabilities. So, hi, my name is, I am Denny, and I have my Twitter handle Dennie Declercq, at Dennie Declercq. And I'm inventor of the hashtag Dreaming is Believing. And Dreaming is Believing started 2 years ago, 3 years ago almost. That was my dream to become an international, worldwide famous conference speaker. I've been there, and I'm still there. At this time, it's virtual, but I see the world. I have seen the world, and I'm really still encouraged to show the world my view on accessibility and my insight on the virtual way right now. So, and I'm even in these 2 years, I growed a lot, and so I'm even a Microsoft MVP. So I get my second renewal right now. In Belgium, I'm president and developer at the nonprofit DDSoft, and we help people with disabilities and other social organizations that I call. But I am not an AI engineer. I'm not an AI engineer at all. But let's say Microsoft saves my life. I'm going to tell you about what I see if I combine my expertise in accessibility with taking an overview on the Microsoft Cognitive Services platform. And the Microsoft Cognitive Services platform is a platform where developers can leverage AI without being an AI engineer or being a math rockstar. And to be sure, sometimes it takes time to develop a whole application, really running application, with a lot of customers, with a lot of people using it. And maybe that's the reason that I'm just going to inspire you with some ideas. I'm going to give you some little live demos, but I don't have a real solution rolled out yet for the bigger public. So my workload is not big enough to do it all. And at DDSoft, I also have, during COVID right now, other customers for other applications. So I don't have, unfortunately, the time to build all these crazy ideas. But I really hope to inspire you, and maybe you can take some ideas. I give it away for free. So we're going to see what I'm going to tell about. So the content will be today, I will start with a primer into accessibility. Then I'm going to talk about the Microsoft Cognitive Service, and I'm going to give you an API overview. I'm going to show you some real-world problems of people with disabilities. And then I called the real inspiration. So there's real inspirational stuff that you really can start to build. And then I have, just to play with words, real world inspiration. And the difference is that this solution is already built, not by me, but by other people. I'm going to tell you about the AI for Good program, the grant from Microsoft. And I'm going to tease you with an extra inspirational trigger. I'm going to tell you and help you how to get started. And that's already the end of this talk. So I started imagine. So imagine a world where there are no boundaries anymore between people with and without disabilities. All people with disabilities or with various other abilities are living together, are doing everything like you. You are taking a bus or a taxi, and next to you there's a person with a disability who fully belongs to the life. That was always my mission, and it's still always my mission at DDSoft. And even right now, in these times of this global pandemic, we see that people with disabilities, for example, people with learning disabilities that has difficulties to read or to understand information, they are excluded more and more. One of the first talks that I gave was at NDC Sydney was the power of inclusion, so 3 years ago. It was all about how you include people with disabilities. And I always believed and still believe that modern technologies, as it apps combined with AI, really can help those people to just take part in life like we are doing. And maybe just at this times of global pandemic, you just need it right more. But before you can build AI solutions for people with disabilities, maybe you just need a primer into accessibility and how people with different abilities or disabilities live and what are the difficulties. So I'm going to start at the primer into accessibility for you. So you have different kind of disabilities. You have people with learning disabilities, people with autism, people with visual disabilities, auditory difficulties, people with motoric restrictions, and you also have a lot more disabilities. And you have combinations of those, or combination of disabilities with also other diseases. And then you can say people with motoric restrictions, what has something to do with using a computer or using a smartphone. Yeah, maybe they are paralyzed and they can only move their eyes. Yeah, then they cannot use their arms and their hands, and then there can be a limitation to use a computer or a smartphone. So each of the disabilities really can be affected with modern technologies. So, and if I talk about people with learning disabilities, most of the social conferences that I've been, people really don't know really what it means. What are people with learning disabilities? So it's an intellectual retardation. So the most well-known disability on this spectrum is people with Down syndrome. It's not the only disability that causes learning disabilities, but it's the most well-known disability. And to have the diagnosis, or to be really official with the diagnosis with the learning disabilities, you need to have significant limitation in both. This is intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. I know you are thinking, what are those crazy things? So next slide, I'm gonna give a bit more explanation. Intellectual functioning is also called intelligence. It's the mental capacity, and if they diagnose people with an intellectual disability or a learning disability, and most of the time they have a IQ score between 70, 75. It's not that big. It's like really young children. And then they also need to have, for the diagnosis criteria, difficulties with adaptive behavior. These are conceptual skills, language and literacy, money, time and numbers. They also have difficulties with social skills, social responsibility, and self-esteem. And then you also have practical skills, activities in daily living, and then personal care and healthcare. You will see later on this talk, and maybe you already can think about it, that a lot of the disabilities or difficulties can be solved by computer software, by apps, and by AI. And we're going to see some examples further on. But I think you can imagine, by example, if you can build a recognition for money, by example, for money, coins, and banknotes, and that your smartphone can detect the money, that already can lower the barrier for the people with a disability to work with money. It's just a simple example because you need to see a lot more today. And if I talk about accessible software or accessible AI systems, I always start at the principles of inclusion, and simple that it means that people with or without disabilities are doing the same activities, living in the same district, and working together. And the adjustments are done per person. In the past, a long time ago, people with disabilities really went to institutions. They were placed away from their family, so that's not what we want anymore, hopefully. But then an accessible software and engage with the AI really can help them just to be in the field of other people. And then I also want to talk a bit about digital difficulties for people with disabilities. And so people with learning disabilities have or can have, most of the time have. So you always have to speak inclusive, and you really cannot say they always have difficulties with. But most of the time, that persons have difficulties with reading and understanding information. So that's from the part of the language and the literacy. People with autism can have difficulties understanding and seeing structure. Then people with blindness or vision loss have a decreased ability to read and to navigate. So if I talk about navigate, then I talk about even navigation software, GPS, and so. And then you have people with auditory difficulties or disabilities. They most of the time have difficulties with hearing notifications and following movies without audio description. That's also the reason that if you look on Microsoft movies, by example, on YouTube, if you go to the Channel 9 movies or from the Microsoft account, they always have subtitles in the same English language. So subtitles are not always to translate to another language, but can also be just the same language. For example, an English movie with English subtitles, just for people with hearing difficulties. And the notification is also really important. If you see that notification, we all know them. If you don't hear them, then it can be more difficult to let them know that there are notifications, that there are changes in the application or in the system. So our focus today will be people with learning disabilities, people with autism, and people with, let's say, different mental health situations. Why I include that people, it's not an official disability. In fact, it's not a disability. But most of the difficulties that people with learning disabilities can have and people with autism can have also really reflect on people with mental health situations. So if you really can be accessible for the two groups above, most of the time you also help people with mental health situations. So you survived the part about people with disabilities, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was not too boring for you because you are from another world, maybe just only IT. And so, but that's the reason I really want to deliver that kind of talks on software conferences to inspire you in that theme. So by now, I'm going to explore with you the Microsoft Cognitive Services, and I'm going to show you which services you definitely can use to make accessible apps. Today I'm going to talk about APIs that you can use directly. So I mean, the direct effect will be to be more accessible. What you will see in the cognitive service, you can maybe have some combinations. We really build a more accessible application. So you have direct APIs for accessibility and indirect APIs for accessibility. I'm going to start just with today with the direct APIs because we have more enough to say about that. And I'm going to give you, as I said, some live demos just to show what a non-AI or an engineer or a non-math rockstar can build in some really simple clicks and leverage the power of AI via the Microsoft Cloud. So if you get started with Microsoft Cognitive Services, it is in the Microsoft Azure platform. So you need with Azure an Azure account, and you also can have, of course, a free tryout, a free demo account on Azure to get started. And in fact, you have a lot of cognitive services at this time. Here was just a screenshot took about some APIs, but what's better than looking to a screenshot of some APIs? I think a live demo. So I just. Now you should see my Azure portal. So we are going to create a new research. Then you have AI plus machine learning. And then you can click on See All. Okay, I should do it. It's here. So then you can search for cognitive services. Why internet connection? Why? It's here. Then you can click on see more. And then you see all the Microsoft cognitive services. And then for the next demo, I'm going to show you I need the speech service. So you can start creating it, but if it doesn't work, of course, I already created it. So, and I tested everything, so it's going to be work. So I hope it's just the Azure portal that's a bit of lacking. Yeah, but otherwise we don't spend too much time about that. But here you see speech. I click on speech. Then you can click on create. It's gone away. So, but I think you see the fact you can just create a speech service like other Azure services. It's not that difficult. And then you can select a pricing tier and a region. And then you can get a key, the two keys. And that keys you need in your application, but I think you all see how you create an Azure service is not that important. I'm gonna skip this just to internet and WebEx meetings, and we're going to go further, and we will see what it will bring. But because I already have all the keys, it doesn't will be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem. So the first cognitive speech service that I want to touch on is the speech service. And the speech service is a text-to-speech, but enriched with the power of AI. And it's way more natural than normal text-to-speech. On Android devices and even iPhones and even right now on Windows 10, you have text-to-speech, but it is not with AI. It is less natural and it also is more expensive for your device. And another talks maybe you saw that I said that a lot of people with disabilities have most of the time little money, and then maybe they have a cheaper device. And then with Azure, it should be better because it's not running on a device. And within the speech service, you also have custom voice. And custom voice can be trained, by example, with the voice of somebody they really know, by example, their mom or their caregiver. And for some people, for example, with autism or with mental health situations, it really can helpful if they hear the person that they know and not just a robotic computer voice. So in some cases, it really will work and will have a better impact on the person. So I'm going to give you a demo of the speech API. And for this, I just have my Visual Studio opened. I just start to give the demo. And if you see it, then you will, I will walk a bit about the code. So it's just a console application, and maybe you can say a console application for people with disabilities. Of course not. But the proof I will show is that just, by example, text-to-speech, the device text-to-speech wasn't a thing on console application, and with And the Azure Cognitive Services, it really doesn't mind, and it doesn't matter from which type of application that you start the speech service. It always works. So, hello, Sydney.
Hello, Sydney.
You should hear it. Then I can say I want to continue.
Nice to be here.
And now I will show you this application. You really don't need a lot of code. It's really, really simple and easy to make. And the starting that you have to do in your dependencies, you need a NuGet package for the Microsoft Cognitive Speech. This is the Microsoft Cognitive Speech, that NuGet package you need. Then I have the file keys, but because I don't want to show my key because we are live on a talk and you cannot steal my key, so I made the same class, but keys demos is just the same but not filled in. Then I made it a static class with a public static strings. It's good for that type of a solution. And I have my endpoint, my key one, and my region. And of course, if I want to push this afterwards on open source, for example, on GitHub, that is not right now. Momentarily, at this time, it's still on my own device. Then I really need to connect it with Azure Key Vault, of course. Or I have the same problem of showing my real keys. Then I have a repository, that's CSpeech. And then you have the synthesis to speaker async that you can call the speech API from Azure. So you can just call that Cognitive Services Speech API. And then you will load the text, and then you can give some feedback on if it succeeded. And then we have our, in other words, you have your error handling. And then I have my program.cs, and it's just building some really simple UI and or UX in console white line, and that I make a do loop. I ask the text that I want to speak, and then I just ask if they want to continue, and I do a console.read key. So it's really no rocket science. And if you know that it's really with AI, yes, magical, as I said. So that was a demo on Microsoft Speech API. So, but as I said, you have a lot of APIs that really can help to make accessible apps and embed the life of people with disabilities. You have the Vision API that analyze images. By example, you can take a picture, you can let by the smartphone, for example, let the person with a disability take a picture, and then the API or the smartphone application say what it is. By example, like I said, some money or some rules or some text or some clothes, words related. You have the Face API, and that can detect emotion. This can detect facial hair, smile, and age. So this, for example, can be built to check if the mental state of the person, if he is quite happy or if he's too worried. And then, of course, you have the bot service. And with the bot service, you really can make bots, and they really can assist people with disabilities. By example, you can make a bot that you also can combine with text to speech, and then they really can have a complete guideline on certain situations. For example, a guideline what to do if what happens. For example, if you have to go to the groceries or if you are in panic. So it really can help. Guidelines you can always for clothing, choosing clothes, choosing activities. You can do this by a bot, and then this can be very personalized and can be combined also with text to speech. You also have the immersive reader. And the immersive reader is also a Microsoft Cognitive Services API, and this included accessibility features like reading aloud websites, But they also have possibilities to link pictographs to websites, to certain parts of text of the websites. And you have text appearance options. By example, you can colorize the verbs, distinguish between the nouns, and you can also have a bigger spacing between the words. This can be very helpful for people with learning disabilities, but for example, also very helpful for people with dyslexia. This really can be helpful. So I show you some theory about people with disabilities. I show you some cognitive service APIs. Right now, I'm going to tell you some real-life situations that people with disabilities can have and what we can build for them with AI. So the difference will be, it will not only be about computer problems that I talk in the first chapter, but it really will be really real-life problems in daily life and how you can make assisting systems for them with AI. So literacy, so reading information and understanding written text, recognizing money. So math, you see this all applications that you can build, by example, with your smartphone connected to AI applications. By even Microsoft already have the Microsoft translation, by example, that you can take a picture of text, but even for recognizing money, or maybe some math, you can take, by example, pictures of some math situations or some math problems, and then let it calculate for your application. And it really will make the world more accessible for people with learning disabilities. One of the big problems that people with autism can have or may have is problems with executive functioning. And executive functioning, that is planning what for people with disability, maybe they call it really simple tasks, but that's not for everyone on the autism spectrum easy. By example, I am also autistic, or I have autism. And for me, it's my example more easy to travel the world to Sydney, by example, if I should be there, than just doing the groceries. You cannot believe just doing my weekly groceries, how difficult that it is for me. So this is an example of executive functioning. But also making choices. I really can, sometimes I can a lot of people on the autism spectrum also, that's not me only, really continually thinking about and doubting about a choice. And then really you can make a application with AI that really can help in that typical situation, how the choices can be made. And maybe some training on concentration is also some difficulty. But it's more something concentration for people on the ADHD or the ADD spectrum. Some quote that I say, it started with a neighbor of me that I say always, I have no elbows, I don't feel if I'm going over your borders and if this annoys you. So of course it's a bit of figurative talking. No elbows, it's not a real thing, but I don't always feel if I'm doing the right things or if I'm not offending people, and really that can be difficult for, by example, self-esteem. So self-esteem and self-trust can be hard. Can I really do this, or can another person really do this? Will this really work? And then I really think that you can do training with AI or made applications that train people with different abilities or disabilities, that they really become self-confident, that they are checked, that they are self-confident before they do it in other situations. I don't say it's always needed, but it can be helpful for some people. For example, Microsoft also have that PowerPoint has at this time that you can train in PowerPoint your rehearsals of your talk. There's an option to do this, and you also can do this for other situations, of course, if you build it yourself. So as you see, all those problems I spoke about can be fixed, helped, coached, assisted with the power of Microsoft Cognitive Services. So at this time, I'm going to give you real inspiration. And what is real inspiration? It's let's call it recipes for applications that I give away, ideas. that you can build, and you can do it, of course, open source, but you even are allowed to do it or make your business and your money about that, because my mission is to inspire people. And as I said, I don't have the time and the time capacity to build it all myself. So, and as much people with disabilities are helped, the happier that I am. So that's my mission. So feel free to take them away. So I'm gonna talk about Dave, and Dave wants to learn to make soup. Dave loves soups, and Dave is 30 years old and lives in an inclusive living project on his own. He has a learning disability, and reading recipes from Belgian famous cook Piet Huizentruid's cookbook is really difficult for him. And even online, Piet has nice recipes for easy to make soups. Piet Huizentruid is a television cook, and he is really famous for really easy to make recipes, so not that difficult. But to be sure, you need to be able to read to make the recipe. With the cognitive service and the immersive reading, website owners can add immersive pages to their websites. An immersive page is a page with tools to split words, link to pictograms, and read aloud words and text. So on this, you can really make, for example, the page of Piet Huizentruid's cookbook really easy for people with learning disabilities. So let's talk about my problems. Not only about fake persons or just fake demo situations and personas. Maybe for me, my vision barber would be ideal. For me, the concentration in combination with I also have a slight or decent sight loss, and the combination with shaving myself is not always that easy. So maybe each detail of my facial hair in the mirror, yeah, it can be better. Sometimes my mom said, "Oh, you're not shaved that well today." Oh my God, no, it's right. Maybe I just should have an app that connects to Microsoft Cognitive Services with the Face API. And in the Face API, there's a property bag, so facial hair, and then you really can make an application that checks if you don't have facial hair. Or even people who really want to trim their beard a little bit, they want to have some facial hair, but not that much. They really can, you can adjust or you can train or set a double. It's just a C# thing or a Python thing or a Go Java thing to just set the variable of the allowance of facial hair, and then you really can take a picture, send it to the service, and then it detects if you are shaved well or not. As I said, you can have different languages. It's for all the same. All the Microsoft Cognitive APIs work with different languages. So not only with C# or the Visual Basic.NET. So you can go on the Microsoft Cloud, on Azure, and you can use whatever language you want. So Lisa is autistic, and Lisa tries to live alone. And she just started to live on herself, but she needs some extra coaching from her mom on doing her laundry. And sometimes, if things doesn't go well, she's got really stressed and she has some panic. So Lisa, her mom, has collaborated with a developer that made a bot service in Microsoft Cognitive Services and made a scenario for Lisa and her mom. And Lisa, her mom, put it all the steps to do laundry in the bot service in a simple front-end class. The developer trained the bot service and the cognitive service with text-to-speech and the cognitive custom voice and the speech API. Lisa can contact with the bot via speech with the custom voice, and she can hear her mom giving the orders to do her laundry. But even if really has Lisa have a panic attack or really have more difficult questions, they really can have an emergency option. Maybe just start with calming down on whatever time of the day. And if it's really too hard, the bot can handle it really to the real phone, by example, of the mom. And it really helps, Lisa. To be sure, there is an example or an ideal situation that is not there yet. But all the things are really possible to build right now with the Cognitive Service API. And I like to travel. Yeah, I know it's COVID-19, but I also like to walk outside. As I said, unfortunately, at this time, it's not easy. But if I come home and if we are going back to normal times, each year, each twice in a year, in the start of the winter and the start of the summer, I'm becoming ill. I'm becoming a bit physical sick because I made the wrong clothes choices. I clothe too warm on the bad times, or I clothe too cold. So, and then I have a cold, as I said. But also, that really can help. If, for example, you made the cognitive API, maybe you can take a picture of all your clothes in the wardrobe, and then it can predict that, for example, the Microsoft Graph, so not AI, but you can connect everything at this time that looks into your agenda, your Outlook agenda, and maybe also with the external weather API from there are vendors enough. Then you really can make an application, an app that you start your day, you open your app, and it predicts what you should wear. It even can go further. I give my example on outside temperatures and rain or no rain, by example. But you also can do it for typical situations. Do you have to do a formal style of clothing? By example, there's a birthday celebration of your wife or your girlfriend's boss at work, if it's not COVID, or you have to go to just to a friend for a birthday party. You really can also see it in the agenda, and then you really should also label the clothes to, by example, some events, some degrees. And you really should nice to have your application, you open your iPhone or your smartphone, and it looks what to wear today. These are all stuff that are not there yet, and they really have to be personalized a lot. But as I said, the apps are not there yet, but all the cognitive services and even all the hardware features are there. So these are all applications that can be built right now. There is no long-term future anymore. So just imagine, that's just really nice. So I gave you some real inspiration of things you can build. I also want to show some things that were built before by other people in the world and that are built for help people with disabilities, but not only for people with disabilities. You will see later. I'm going to show you some AI products just to prove that all these situations are possible to build. It are movies, but don't going to play the whole movies. I'm just going to play a bit because I'm here to present to you, and you have here see the links. It's we're granted to my own space, but you only can see a little bit, because you can look at afterwards. Otherwise, you don't have to watch to a live tech talk. Okay, it's there. But my internet don't love me today.
Seeing AI is a Microsoft research project for people with visual impairments. The app narrates the world around you by turning the visual world into an audible experience. Point your phone's camera, select a channel, and hear a description. The app recognizes saved friends.
Jenny near top right, 3 feet away.
Describes the people around you, including their emotions.
20.
So I'm going to do a bit fast forward just because you have just an impression and
Details.
Heated microwave bowl on height.
And even hear descriptions of images in other apps like Twitter by importing them into Seeing AI.
A close-up of Bill Gates.
Finally, explore our experimental features like scene descriptions to
I also have Microsoft Translator, so you can say, is it something to do with accessibility? It's definitely also can be used and should be used for people without disabilities, but you can believe that if you, by example, have a learning disability or another disability, learning another language can just be more difficult than otherwise. So that is really inclusion. It's built for a lot of people, not only for people with disabilities, but they also can be useful for people with disabilities.
This is a new multi-device translation feature on the Microsoft Translator application.
Si tratta di una nuova funzionalità di traduzione multi-device sull'applicazione Microsoft Translator.
Wir können eine echte Konversation halten über
Verso la barriera linguistica.
So as I said, you see the links here, but also later on this talk, I'm going to give you a slide with the overview of all the links.
et
You can also do it live. So as I said, also can be better live instead of a movie. So I just do this. I'm going to Bing. And I do Bing Translate. So I just can say it in my own language. So I'm from Belgium. I speak Netherlands. So you also can listen. So in Dutch it should be.
Dag. Dag iedereen, fijn om hier te zijn.
Hello everyone. Nice to be here.
So it's really the voice translation. So, and of course you can do it in a lot of other languages. So this is all AI. So maybe it's better if you see it and just seeing the link on the demo. But you also can talk to it. For example, it's not only typing, but you also can say, you can click here. Hallo, ik ben Denny.
Hello, this is Ben Danny.
Yeah, but names are really difficult, of course, and if you call the but so.
Hallo, ik ben.
No. But you see the concept? You also have a Help Picto, and Help Picto is an application that is developed for people with children's autism.
Arthur, c'est un autiste sévère qui n'a pas de langage et qui a 15 ans.
Les défauts de compréhension augmentent le niveau d'anxiété, ce qui peut donner lieu à des troubles du comportement ou alors à des destructions de l'environnement.
Microsoft a développé ce qu'on appelle des cognitive services, mis à disposition dans le cloud et qui vont permettre d'exploiter des choses qui étaient très difficilement exploitables auparavant. De la reconnaissance d'image. Avec une idée, on en est sorti avec une solution.
So that is an application specifically built for children with autism, and it's also completely with the Microsoft Cognitive Services.
On est une petite société.
And just as I said, accessibility or inclusive applications or inclusive services doesn't always have to be just about people with disabilities. If you just think about the world of conference speakers are just a lot more easier at this time just because Microsoft added a lot of cognitive functions in PowerPoint. You really can make stunning slide decks without being a designer. that is also a funny thing because I'm definitely quite sure that a lot of people using some of the features, for example, the PowerPoint feature, though they are knowing that they are using machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, I can think about a lot of people really don't knowing it, and maybe they say, "Oh my God, AI! Why is it needed for? I don't need AI. It's not the reality." But then they are making slides, for example, not only speak at conferences, but people, for example, at the office, making a presentation just for a runway sprint for some budgetary things. I really can't believe that they are using AI, without knowing that they are using AI, and maybe it's also a really interesting thing. So if you are wanting to plan to make an accessible application, maybe with the insight I gave you and with the inspiration I gave you, then you really can apply for Microsoft. There's always a cohort on AI for accessibility. And then you can first of all get grants for Azure credits, so for the cognitive services. But you also can have coaching for the application. So you can also have coaching, and this is normally with the closest Microsoft locations close to you. It can be of times if you really want to do it right now, in this times of the pandemic, that it also can be all virtual, of course. But if you go to go.ddis.be/Microsoft AI, you will come on the AI for Accessibility grant, and then you will see what it have to offer. So as I said, normally I make this talk for 45 minutes, so was the last time, and I have an hour. And I also have another conference talk that I start to submit. And with the time that I have left, I really want to tease you a bit with an extra inspirational trigger. And I want to I just want to show you a demo about the future of web accessibility. You have seen earlier at this talk that I talked about the immersive reading, but there are also other possibilities. Maybe you mentioned that I also said that with text-to-speech, you can use speech on things that you couldn't do before. In the past, I was a developer of mobile applications. I still am, but in the past, I only made a mobile application because I really believe that text-to-speech is really a key thing for people with learning disabilities. But speech didn't exist on the web. Yes, you have screen readers. That's another thing. That's for people with blindness or vision loss. But right now, if you can see that you can do text-to-speech on a console application, you definitely can make something for the web too. I built a Blazor application, and I just added here the same speech service.cs. It's the same that I had in my console application. I also have the keys and the keys demo. Then I just have, let's say, a normal Blazor application. I have some pictures, and I have some Blazor files. I just give it a run. Don't need this. Just run it local on IIS Express. And you will see my future vision on web accessibility. But I'm really also doing a conference talks about this, but that is a complete topic just about a new way of accessible website. And in that talk, I really talk about the code patterns and how to code it and how to include, for example, also the normal accessibility things like area. But as I said, I'm just teasing you what are the possibilities with accessible websites right now. Maybe at another NDC, maybe NDC London, I submit a session for the how to make it complete. You know, coincidence doesn't exist. It's just right here. I click on optimism. I just can hear.
Optimism.
Okay, see, you have to be positive.
Being positive for what you have is really important. It's important to look to what you got, to the opportunities that you have instead of looking what you don't have.
So that I see is the future for me of web accessibility. So that's really accessible for people with learning disabilities, and especially if you can read aloud each paragraph. So as I said, I have I'm not going to talk about the code today. I have other talks about that, but just to show what's possible. And that wasn't there before Blazing and the Microsoft Cognitive Services. That wasn't possible. So that was the future of web accessibility. So getting started. So I have 5 minutes and it will be very okay. So do research in accessibility and in people with disabilities. I suggest to learn about Microsoft Cognitive Services. Of course, get further inspired, and play with existing tools. So wrap up, I talked about what cognitive services can do. I talked about some difficulties that people with disabilities may have. And I link them to cognitive services. Most of the time I spend on the speech API, but I also talked that with, for example, the vision API, you can detect facial hair, you can detect happiness. I talked about what you can do with your wardrobe. And I talk also about immersive recipes. So I hope you get inspired. As I promised, here I have all the links to the movies, because I don't show them all because it's a live presentation. You can grab a screenshot of this and then you can go to the movies afterwards later on. So that was me, thanks. So I was Dennie Declercq. I'm on Twitter at Dennie Declercq. And I have 5 minutes or 4 minutes from if I have some questions, and I try to provide you some answers.